Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I hope you're all having a wonderful afternoon. We've got Kyle on the board here, and we are going to talk today about Morbius the Living Vampire. Now, we had a great show yesterday. Dan Price came on and talked about Bigfoot Knows Karate. So if you didn't get a chance to watch the show, check out our YouTube page, and you can find it there along with just about every other show we've done. So check that out. Also, tomorrow we are going to be talking about the Book of Boba Fett trailer that dropped yesterday or Monday. And also some information I have gleaned about the Eternals from Marvel 101. So that's pretty interesting. A couple little tidbits I got out of that, which I thought were nice. So that'll be tomorrow's show. Today, all about Morbius the Living Vampire. Now, this has been an interesting movie because the original trailer dropped back in January of 2020. So that means this movie, we got the first trailer more than a year and a half ago. What? Yeah, much more than that. 18 months? 20 months? I mean, we're coming up to 2 years now on when that trailer dropped. So that's, January 28th, 2022 is when when Sony dropped the first Morbius trailer. And I know a lot of people were pretty excited about it then. My ex-wife, who doesn't really go into the superhero movies, was immediately like, I want to go see Morbius. Let's go see Morbius. Like, oh, okay, we can go see Morbius, but it's going to be a little while. Well, it's been postponed and postponed. I don't think there's any spoilers, JD, because it's all stuff from the trailers. So if you're not watching the trailers, if you completely want to avoid any knowledge of this, then this is not the show to watch, because I do go in depth into these things. But I don't think we'll have any spoilers for the actual movie, because I don't think I have any spoilers for the movie. I just have the videos to go by. So, all right. So let's talk about this. So again, the film was originally, the trailer came out in January 13th, 2020. It's going to be released on January 28th of 2022. So it's literally going to be over 2 years from the first trailer drop to when the movie comes out. That's got to be a record of some kind. Now, the film focuses on, of course, biochemist Michael Morbius. He's a medical genius with a very rare blood disorder. Determined to save others suffering from the same fate, he experiments on himself, which you would think, with all the years of watching Hammer horror films and about every other monster movie, the idea of experimenting on yourself just wouldn't occur to people anymore. You go get a homeless guy, you give him a sandwich and a shot in the arm, something. You don't necessarily just, it worked out great for Kurt Connors. The Fly, that worked out really well. Dr. Frankenstein's the one that had it right. Just dig up a body. We can work on that. That's great. But no. Another one of those people who decided to experiment on themselves. Well, and of course, the side effects of what, it appeared to be a successful treatment at first, but the adverse effects came on and basically turned him into a form of vampirism. Now, Jared Leto is playing Morbius. Matt Smith is going to be, and I don't know if I have this name right, because I don't think I've actually heard it pronounced officially yet. Loxias Crown. Loxias. That's a tough name. Tyrese Gibson is going to be Simon Stroud, who is a character from the comics, just like Crown is. Adria Arjona is going to play Martine Bancroft, who also is from the comics. Al Madrigal, who I'm used to seeing on The Daily Show, is Agent Rodriguez, and we see Michael Keaton is coming back as Adrian Toomes. Plus, we get Jared Harris, who is a remarkably good actor. And all we have him listed as is Morbius's mentor. JD says all of his research and years dedicated to science, and now he just sucks. JD has his humor on today. Yep. Now, the initial trailer left us with a lot of questions. Like, the appearance of Keaton signaled that the film was in the MCU, with him reprising his role as Toomes, a.k.a. the Vulture. But then there's an image of Spider-Man in an alley that says murderer on it, showing the suit that Tobey Maguire wore in the films. Also, the masthead of the Daily Bugle was from the Maguire films and was used again recently in the Venom movies. Now, this makes things somewhat confusing, as in which universe is the film taking place in. Then they throw in an end credit scenes from Venom, Let There Be Carnage, which this might be the only spoiler, JD, if you haven't seen it. But, the Venom end credit scene kind of puts Venom into the same world as Spider-Man No Way Home. And the fact that Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be released before this comes out means that we really don't know what the situation is going to be going into this. So, yeah, we're going to try to piece it together, give you all the information and stuff. But I figure the first thing we ought to do, and if Kyle is ready, is roll the trailer.
I was supposed to have the trailer?
Yep, I told you last night to get the trailer.
Was I awake?
You were.
Okay, give me a second.
Okay.
In the meantime, JD's vampire jokes are a little late for spooky season.
Yeah, but we are talking about a vampire.
Is he really, though? He's a living vampire. We should probably talk about the reason he's a living vampire and the comic code, shouldn't we?
Well, we're going to... I hadn't even thought about that approach. I know that he was a living vampire because of, what made him a living vampire. But yeah, I hadn't thought about the fact that...
I mean, especially to stall for time while I get you the trailer.
Yeah. I mean, the character was created in... I've got it right here. Hang on. I clicked on the wrong button. Morbius was created in 1971. By then, were vampires still not allowed in comics?
Nothing undead was still, the code was still very much in effect. I mean, people were starting to buck the code. I mean, you had devil in a bottle or demon in a bottle and some of these other things that had happened. But it was still very much in effect, so you had to be kind of careful.
So they made him a living vampire, which makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of carried through. He's the fact that he's a living vampire keeps him separate from the other vampires. And he's also involved in, he's what makes Luaxia's crown. And he's somehow connected to giving Blade his powers. So, right, and that's all because he's a living vampire. So, what's even funnier is when they put him into the animated Spider-Man series, they couldn't show him sucking blood. So they gave him these little plasma suckers on his fingertips, and he actually sucked in plasma through his fingertips in the animated series.
So kind of like when you go to the doctor and they check your blood sugar, but the reverse?
Yes.
Right. Well, now that we've stalled, I have the trailer.
Michael, I've known you since you were a child. You're a gift. You always have. If there's an answer to your disease, you'll find it. I should have died years ago. Why am I
I still here if not to fix this? But, I have a rare blood disease, and I'm running out of time. This could be my last chance.
You're up to something. What is it?
It's not exactly legal.
I want to see you get hurt more than you already have.
This would be a cure.
At what cost? Michael, what's happening?
I went from dying to feeling more alive than ever. Increased strength and speed. The ability to use echolocation. And an overpowering urge to consume blood. How far are we allowed to go to fix something that's broken? Until the remedy is worse than the disease.
Michael Morbius. Got tired of doing the whole good guy thing, huh?
What's up, Doc?
Hey, Kyle,
Yeah.
that's the one from a year and a half ago.
Hey, that's the one that says Morbius trailer. Let's see if I can get another one.
Yeah, look for one with like a date from the last 2 days.
But now I'm going to have to watch another trailer.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of different footage.
Yeah, but you know how I feel about trailers.
Well, then you shouldn't have gotten the wrong one, shouldn't you?
That was the first one I'd ever seen. Okay.
Dates are important.
Well, I mean, if dates are important, they should say Morbius trailer, that the one that Dan is going to want on YouTube. All right, let's try this one, shall we? Remove, share. Oh no. Okay.
We are
Here we
a
go.
well-oiled machine today.
Well, hey, I've never seen a Morbius trailer.
Well, now you get two.
That was the first one. Because, I don't watch trailers for these things. I don't want to know.
Mhm.
Like, I already have several giant plot problems with that trailer. So,
Oh, wait till you see this one.
oh, Lord, I'm going to hate it, aren't I? Here we go.
You need a doctor? I am a doctor. I should have died years ago. People all over the world have my disease. I'm here to find a cure. We have to push the boundaries, take the risks. If you're gonna run, do it now.
People are strange.
Dr. Michael Morbius, you've been missing for 2 months.
When you're a stranger,
Then you were found on a container ship that washed up off of Long Island.
faces look ugly. When you're alone,
What did you do to yourself, Doctor?
I wish I knew. I went from dying to being more alive than ever.
It worked.
Not exactly. I have increased strength and speed and some form of bat radar. What else can I do?
There are limits. There has to be.
There's something inside of me that wants to hunt and consume blood.
Michael.
When you're strange, faces come
Can you control it?
I don't know.
Half the city wants to kill you.
remembers your name.
We haven't had anything this good since that thing in San Francisco.
When you're strange,
The other half wants to control you.
Hey, Dr. Mike, you and I should stay in touch.
I'd do anything to save a life, but I don't know what I'm capable of.
You save lives, you don't take them. Are you here to heal the world? Or to destroy it? Who the hell are you, Matt?
I am Venom. I'm just kidding. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
All right. I kind of like the ending where he calls himself Venom. I know it's a silly connection to the other movie, but it got me to laugh, and that's what's important, right? Yeah. All right. I'm going to answer Adrian's question real quick. Adrian asked, is she his best friend, or did they change it so that she's a love interest? Didn't he originally murder his best friend, Adrian something? Didn't he really have... in the comics, Martine is his girlfriend. When he got turned, he had an assistant working for him that gets killed, and he's also got a mentor friend that he goes after, but Martine doesn't get killed till later on. I'm actually going to go into all the characters pretty in depth in a little bit. I don't love the impending DCMA claim for that because of the People Are Strange song. I don't think they play it long enough at any one point. But, all right. So let's talk first about the new trailer. Now we see that... now we've seen the scene of him cutting his hand before the bat's flying out at them. But the new material is Stroud giving us the rundown of how Morbius went missing for 2 months, then appeared on the ship that run aground. This is very reminiscent of the Dracula novel and how Count Dracula travels to America on a ship and attacks the crew as they went along. And it's also from the original Morbius comic. It also indicates that he doesn't know what he did to himself, whether that means he doesn't have a memory of it, of the event, or he's just not sure how he's changed remains unclear. I mean, does he know how he got on the ship and that he killed everybody on the ship? Or was that just in a hunger haze and he doesn't know what happened? Now, in the comics, his experiment gives him a much more hideous physical appearance. He's got the pale skin and deterioration of his nose where it flattens out. Here the experiment just seems to have given him washboard abs and a great hair, along with increased strength, speed, and bat-like radar sense. And no one ever says radar sense like something else. So isn't the word bat redundant? Echolocation, he could have said a lot of things, but bat-like radar sense or bat radar. Later, when we see him fly or glide, at least around the subway cars, you think there's a better place to try out those powers, don't you, than a moving subway car? But so those abilities seem to only be the beginning, but he also has the desire to hunt and ingest blood, which is kind of overwhelming. In the comics, he transforms into Michael Jackson. JD. So he gets all the abilities of a vampire and only a couple of the downside. He doesn't have any problems with crosses or garlic. I don't know if silver affects him. I think it's part of the cure he works on, but it doesn't necessarily. And he can go out in the sunlight, but he burns. So he's just Irish at that point. When they show us the view of the city, we see a couple of different buildings that are important. There's Horizon Labs, which is connected to Morbius. And there's also the Oscorp building, which is always important in the Spider-Man world. But here, the Oscorp logo they're using is actually the one from the Andrew Garfield movies. Yes, his assistant's name is Emil, correct. And Emil gets killed like that in the comics. So the fact that they're using the Andrew Garfield Oscorp logo, and we see the Tobey Maguire costume on the wall. The headline of the newspaper is the Daily Bugle from the Tobey Maguire era and also the Venom movies. I mean, this is kind of all over the place because then you get Adrian Toomes. So I don't think they want to let us forget that. I think they're bringing a couple of the villains into the Spider-Man universe. So, I mean, both the Lizard and Electro, but there's and also on the newspaper, it's interesting. Besides it being a really horribly written headline, there is no good writer would ever put a headline like that. But they also have one for a rhino being on the loose, referring it to as a zoo hoax, and also whether Black Cat is a friend or foe. So they're hinting at these other Spider-Man characters. There's the reference to the Thing in San Francisco, which is probably Venom Let There Be Carnage. And we get one shot of Matt Smith in the entire trailer, just like they did in the first one. So they're keeping his role as quiet as possible. Now we know who he's playing and what that means based off the comics, but they're doing as much as possible to hide the fact that Matt Smith's in the movie, other than one quick glimpse of him. So we get a version of The Doors' People Are Strange, and I know it's a DCMA thing, but I really wish they would have played more of that. That is such a good mood-setting song for this, and they didn't play enough of it to make the trailer really work well. We get Keaton's character, who again grounds us in the MCU, and he talks in both trailers. We get a version of we do get to see him go full vamp, which is cool, where he gets the teeth and the big flat nose and stuff. And of course, we get the I Am Venom tag, which pretty much solidifies him being in the Venom universe. So it's really kind of a mess looking at these trailers. Now, I think it's a pretty good trailer. It shows us a lot of good scenes of the action. It sets the story up a little better than the first one did. So I like that. I'm surprised how little we are getting to see Matt Smith, because we know he's really going to be kind of the villain of the movie. And I don't know why they're hiding that. I think, if there is a version of Matt Smith, the equivalent of the vampired out version, that would be neat to see in the trailer. And I think that would get a lot of people's attention, being a former Doctor Who playing a vampire or a living vampire. So I'm surprised they're keeping that hidden. They spent a lot of time building up Morbius's abilities without ever saying the word vampire or even living vampires. I mean, it's like we're doing a vampire movie, but we're not. So don't tell anybody. And it almost feels like the last thing they want to do is specifically say which universe this takes place in. They're like going out of their way to make it as vague as possible. And it could be because they need No Way Home to happen to make it clear. Or it could be that they're leaving it as vague as possible so they can then make it up later. Adrian says, I thought it was solidified with San Francisco mention. You would have been a good gag to be surprised with during the movie. Yeah. But again, I mean, we get so many ties to each of these universes. So, but I'm gonna get a little more into that. But let's go over some of the comic book background of the characters that we know that are appearing in the film. Now, this is what Adrian was talking about. Michael Morbius was created by Roy Thomas and Gil Kane in Amazing Spider-Man 101 in October of 1971. He's a Greek-born Nobel Prize-winning biochemist who's suffering from a rare debilitating blood disease that he develops an experimental treatment for involving vampire bats and electroshocks, which all sounds perfectly safe, so that's why he used it on himself. Now, the side effects were that he was turned into a pseudo-vampire who needs to consume blood to survive. And as Kyle pointed out, the good chance the reason he's a living vampire was the Comic Code Authority in the 1970s. Now, the side effect, he gained most of the usual vampire powers in the comics. And while he has an aversion to sunlight, he can survive in it. His appearance did change with the skin turning very pale, his nose flattening, and he grew fangs. He also had the ability to convert others to be like him through biting. So whatever it is in his blood, it can be passed. He then travels to the United States by ship, killing the crew along the way. His first encounter with Spider-Man was at the time he was trying to reverse the process that Peter Parker gave himself 6 arms. And it turns out that Morbius's blood also cured Spider-Man of the 6 arms and reverted Kirk Connors back from being the Lizard. Now, he would then go on to battle like the Human Torch and the X-Men before villains started becoming... He kind of became an anti-hero at that point. He was pitted against various cults and other vampires and eventually joined what they called the Legion of Monsters to investigate something called Starseed. This character has been on the edge of whether he's a hero or a villain, really depending on how the writer wants to use him that month. Hang on, so let me turn that off. So it's interesting that Sony's taken him in the heroish vein because, well, they got Spider-Man and a bunch of villains is kind of how it works out. That's their Spider-Verse. Now, in Absolute Carnage, is probably one of the more recent stories. He was recruited by Iron Fist along with some other heroes to rescue Misty Knight. And at one point, he also accidentally created the villain Hunger, who we will see in this film. So he's got a pretty good... I mean, there's a lot of good Morbius comics out there. He's been a character that is pretty popular. A lot of people like it when he shows up. But I don't know if there is like a definitive Morbius story out there that doesn't take place in somebody else's comic. I don't know if he, I mean, I know he was part of the Midnight Suns and stuff like that. But, you know, he's usually the second fiddle in a book. His girlfriend, Martine Bancroft, was introduced the next episode or next issue of Spider-Man 102. And she was there when he performed his experiment and he killed his assistant, Emil, and then he vanished because he didn't want to kill Martine. But she finds his notes and decides that, and he's got some people that he corresponds with his ideas, one of them being Reed Richards. So she goes to Reed Richards to help, which is how Human Torch ends up going after him. She later gets pulled into a cult called the Cult of New Order, and this is one of the first of a handful of cults Morbius ends up having to deal with. But she's enthralled by a guy named Damon, and he uses her against Morbius. And she ends up becoming this pawn against him more often than not. She later set up a lab for him in a manor using his money, but also she becomes a pawn of a group called the Hell Eyes and is turned into a vampire, and where Morbius is able to cure her, he can't cure himself. But then eventually she decides to turn herself into a vampire because she wants to be able to live all eternity with Morbius. And then she would need to turn him into a vampire as well, but he doesn't want that. And then Spider-Man gets involved and she's about to kill Spider-Man. And Morbius ends up killing her with a table leg. That was probably not the healthiest of relationships in comics. Kyle says these stories were the height of the fear of cults too. Yeah, the Jim Jones thing. So, which is why cults become a big thing in the 70s. But so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with Martine here, because it seems like she's more of the lab assistant than in the comics. So see how they play up the romance and stuff like that here. Simon Stroud, that's the character Tyrese Gibson's playing, is an interesting character. He spent time in the CIA, where he became friends with Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. But then he leaves the agency and joins the NYPD, where he kind of takes on the role of hunting the supernatural, because, of course, the NYPD has a supernatural division, don't they? I mean, Law and Order Special Thing Unit. Well, the first person he goes after is Man-Wolf, who is actually John Jameson, the son of J. Jonah Jameson, which puts him at odds with, oddly enough, Kraven the Hunter, who gets hired as well. So he ends up going at it with Kraven the Hunter. He figures out who Man-Wolf is, but he isn't able to capture him. And Man-Wolf gets away. His next assignment is Morbius, but somehow he ends up teaming with the living vampire against the Hell Eyes and real vampires. He then worked with Black Widow and Spider-Man to bring down one of the Owl's big arm deals. And then he popped up a few more times. Probably the most recent appearance for him was in the Dark Reign series, where he shows up to meet with Norman Osborn because he has the true identity of Facade. So he's been kind of all over the place, but always in the background. He's like a character they forget. Is he near Karen Murphy level of bad? It's pretty close. Actually, I like Karen Murphy. I think, she's a fighter. I mean, and this guy, we'll have to see how he's played. He might be similar to Murphy. But that's a good analogy there, Adrian. He first appeared in Creatures on the Loose, number 30, which I completely forgot was even a series. And that was in July of 1974 by Doug Mensch and George Tuska. Oh, yeah. Well, Karen Murphy is definitely a badass. I don't know if Stroud is, but he does seem to have some kind of tech arm thing that I'm not sure if he's wounded and maybe a vampire bit him and they're trying to prevent it from taking over, or if that's to help him catch vampires. That's going to be interesting to see. But we get that one scene with him with that gear on his arm. All right. One of the more complicated characters in this is Loxias Crown. I really don't know how to pronounce that. Loxias. But who was also known as the Hunger, but not in the beginning. When he first appeared in Spider-Man number 76 in November of 1996, created by Howard Mackey, the character was obsessed with two different Empire State University scientists. The first being a guy named William Fields, who he ends up murdering and going to his young son named Todd, telling him that he would see him again. And then he was gone for 7 years. And then suddenly showed up back at ESU with a bunch of goons and took this whole group of scientists hostage, including Dr. Sidney Lanning, who's his target. And what he wants is this experimental generator that was part of Fields' work and Lanning's work. And he basically wants to turn it on and absorb all the energy from this experimental generator. But Spider-Man and this hero named Shock, which is spelled S.H.O.C., so it's an acronym, they stop him, but it turns out that Shock is now the grown-up Todd Fields. So Crown was right. He did see Todd again. But he also Todd ends up absorbing all the energy from the generator rather than Crown stopping his plans. But Crown would go on, and he'd get involved with Hydra, and he became a lover of someone named Dr. Andrea Jansen, who's important because she was trying to help Morbius find a cure for his vampirism, only to have Crown capture him and do experiments that ended up turning Crown into a living vampire going by the name of Hunger. And as Hunger, he's got enhanced strength, speed, durability on par with Morbius. And like Morbius, again, he's a living vampire too. Todd Fields' mom was the world's famous Mrs. Fields. No, Kyle. Bad, Kyle. Bad. Those are JD's jokes. So it's like, it seems like Crown has this energy absorption ability before becoming a vampire in the comics. But I don't know if that's going to play up here because it's almost like a mutant ability from what I've read. So I don't know if they even want to touch on that. Though we did in Venom Let There Be Carnage, Shriek's power is described as a mutation. So it could end up that way. Another important thing that popped up in the trailer is Horizon Labs, which first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 648, and is a leading company in creating the most advanced technology in the Marvel Universe. It's almost like their ad slogan. It's headed by Max Modell, one of Peter Parker's science idols, who also is a friend of Michael Morbius. Now, this is where Peter ends up making some of his special costumes, like the stealth suit or the spider armor that he has, the more recent one. Max. Yeah, but he lets Max lets Morbius work on staff in one of the labs, specifically lab number 6, and he's known as scientist number 6. And he and Reed Richards work together to create this anti-spider virus serum, which is used to eliminate powers like Spider-Man's. And he's trying to use it also to cure stuff like the Lizard and hopefully himself. But that ends up going horribly wrong too. And this could be where Morbius is working in the film. So it's possible that he's working, because I couldn't, even though we see both Oscorp and Horizon Labs, it makes more sense for him to be in Horizon, because if you go to Oscorp, then you kind of open it up to a lot of characters that maybe they don't want to introduce just yet. So I have a feeling he's going to be working at Horizon Labs. Plus, Horizon is being sun-related, and a vampire, you go for those kind of jokes when you're writing. So, all right. Oh, we're just plugging it through here. All right. The next thing that we got to bring up is Jared Harris. Harris is playing a mentor to Michael Morbius. And I see it kind of odd that they don't just tell us who he is. Because if he's playing Hans Jorgensen, and Hans Jorgensen is part of Morbius's origins, he is a mentor figure to Morbius, and when he turns, he ends up going after him, and that's who Human Torch is protecting, is Jorgensen, and he's also a friend of Reed Richards and stuff like that. So it would make a lot of sense if it's Hans Jorgensen. He's a biology instructor at Empire State University. He's an ex-colleague of Michael Morbius's. He was kidnapped by Morbius for him to develop a cure for the vampirism. But in the end, the X-Men rescued him, and he ended up developing a cure for Spider-Man's illness at the time. That would make a lot of sense, but also it seems like a waste of A, a great actor, and B, why are they keeping his name a secret? So another possibility of another person that worked at ESU, another faculty member that is part of the Spider-Man universe, a fellow biochemist, so it would make a lot of sense that this would be Morbius's mentor, would be Miles Warren. Now, you might know him by the other name he goes by. I just lost it. It's in my brain. Jackal. Now, this is a character that studied for a while under the High Evolutionary and specialized in cloning. He, while teaching, he fell in love with one of his students, happened to be named Gwen Stacy, and blamed Spider-Man for her death at the hands of Green Goblin. He used his abilities that he learned with the High Evolutionary to create clones of Gwen Stacy and of Peter Parker, and in doing so discovers that Peter Parker is Spider-Man because the clone has some of the abilities. Now, this, of course, as he ends up kind of losing his mind and becoming the Jackal and sending people like the Punisher and the Tarantula and the Scorpion all after Spider-Man trying to get him. It's a big, huge storyline, but it also leads into the Clone Saga. It's where Ben Reilly comes from and the Scarlet Spider. So it could be just too huge of a character to introduce. But at the same time, Harris seems like too good of an actor to throw away on a character you're going to use once. So, and again, why are they keeping his identity secret? So it wouldn't surprise me if it's Jorgensen, but at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if it's Miles Warren too, because I think he'd be a very interesting character to introduce at this point. Now, Sony is desperate to create their own universe of characters. Michael Morbius has actually helped cure a couple of heroes. I just read Savage She-Hulk, and he saved her from gamma radiation. Yeah, Michael Morbius he does play on that both sides of the fence a lot of times. He gets brought in for his scientific knowledge. He's helped cure Spider-Man in the past, and She-Hulk, and the Lizard, and a bunch of, so making him a hero makes sense, but they've kind of bounced him back and forth in the comics over the years. Now, like I said, Sony's desperate to create their own universe of characters based on the Spider-Man mythos, but basically they were given this big bag full of villains and anti-heroes to work with while sharing their main character with Marvel Studios. Now, they've done 2 attempts now at Venom, and while I think the first film was a little flawed, but a lot of fun, the second one could have used some more work. It needed some more character development. It needed a little more to it. Now, to make Venom a hero, you have to overlook the fact that this is an alien symbiote that normally burns out and kills the people he's attached to, and also likes to eat the bad guys. Where Morbius, on the other hand, he's more of a sympathetic character because he doesn't want to be a vampire. He's always looking for a cure, and that constant searching for the cure allows audiences to overlook when he kills somebody. I mean, yes, they're still going to have him kill bad people to make him a hero, but just by the fact that he doesn't want the powers. Eddie Brock decides to keep the powers. He and Venom, they want to be the lethal protector. Morbius would love to give up the powers. He doesn't want to go back. Well, I don't know if he would accept going back to the illness he had before, but he really wants to get rid of the vampirism. So you can make Morbius a character just from that sympathetic aspect. You can make him more of a hero, or at least an anti-hero. Well, Venom is the better known character. I just think that Morbius is probably the better for what they want to do. Now, again, we go back to the main question, which is, which universe is this taking place in? And this is the $1 million question. And my honest answer is, I don't know. There are many references to the Sony universe of characters, of Spider-Man characters, as there is to the MCU. I think it really comes down to where the universe is going to be left after No Way Home. You know, this film comes out after that, but before Multiverse of Madness. And I've always thought that, you know, they've been building up towards breaking the multiverse and establishing the multiverse. And Spider-Man No Way Home was going to break the multiverse. And I believe that Multiverse of Madness was going to at least start putting it back together, if not fix it. Put it back in a new way. It might not. It might end up keeping it going until the Fantastic Four movie, but I think it'll start, because I don't think they want to have this big craziness going on for all of Phase 4, or at least as bad as it is. Now, so it's like in between where it breaks and where it's fixed. So whatever it ends up being, this film is going to sit in the middle, and they can do all this craziness. But how is it going to be at the end of it? Will Venom and Spider-Man and Morbius and Vulture all end up in the same universe? And is that universe going to be one where the Daily Planet is a newspaper, or is it a blog? You know, is it a YouTube channel? Is, you know, Mysterio really dead? And are they in the same universe as the Avengers? All this stuff is completely up in the air, which is fascinating to me, because normally things are a little more clear. And yeah, that's a good way to put it, Adrian. It's a type of interludial Elseworld. Now, there's a lot of speculation just where Spider-Man's going to end up after all is said and done. Will he still be in the MCU, or will he move to Sony first? Now, Holland has said that they were treating No Way Home as their version of Endgame, and he wasn't sure if and when the group would be back together. However, it ends up shaking out, though, I think it's safe to say that things aren't going to be the same going forward. You know, they're really changing things up. I know that Holland's contract is just about up. I know the deal with Sony is coming to an end too. Now, Kevin Feige has come out and said that he's not going to let the fans have to go through what they went through a couple of years ago, where it all became up in the air and we didn't know, you know, would Spider-Man still be in the MCU or not. But by saying that, he doesn't necessarily say that, oh, no, Spider-Man's going to stay in the MCU. He's saying that he's just not going to put fans through it. So it sounds like it's either going to be continued or clean cut. And I don't know which way it's going to be. I don't have a good gut feeling for which way it's going to go. There's a story in the new book that came out, the story of the Marvel Studios, and in it, it said that after Amazing Spider-Man 2, when it was obvious that Sony was not going to do another one and that things were going to fall apart, Kevin Feige went over to Amy Pascal and told her, look, you guys aren't getting it. Why don't you let us make the movie? You know, let us have him for the MCU, and then you can put the movie out. But, you know, because if you don't do that, we're going to end up getting him back anyway. And he was looking at this very pragmatically. And by at that point, they'd really established that they knew how to do these movies. And Sony hadn't, you know. I mean, the first two Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies were good. The third one was horrible. The next, the Andrew Garfield first one was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay. The second one was abysmal. And they just really weren't doing that well. So when he said this to her, it upset her. And she ended up breaking into tears and throwing her sandwich at him. Now, they got past all that. And she ended up making the deal. And Sony has made a ton of money doing it this way. Now, the question is, do they think they can do it on their own again? Do they look at the success of Venom and the $800 million it made and think, well, with Spider-Man, we could do even better? Or do they look at the money they've made off of Disney and the juggernaut that is, and how their character ties into, you know, all these other movies? Do they recognize that as being a better financial situation? That's what it's going to boil down to. Which one works best for Sony, and whether they're thinking about it from a pride standpoint or from a financial standpoint. Because I've got to believe that right now it makes more financial sense to keep Spider-Man in the MCU and coming up with some kind of controversial device just to connect the two universes enough that he could travel back and forth. So he does his Spider-Man movies with Marvel. He does the Avengers movies, the Fantastic Four movies. He pops up wherever they want him to. And then he goes over and he shows up in Spider-Man or in Venom and Morbius and stuff like that. It would make sense for them to do it that way, because then they're not putting out as much money. I mean, they put out some of the funding on the Spider-Man movies, but not that much. And they don't put any out on the Disney movies. So it would make sense for them to keep the character in the spotlight, to keep Tom Holland, who's a very popular Spider-Man right now, to keep that train going. But we've seen over the years, Hollywood doesn't always do the smart thing, does it? It doesn't always do what would make the most sense to fans. There is a lot of pride. There's a lot of producers who think they need to change things to justify their job. I'm hoping that doesn't happen here, because I like Spider-Man in the MCU. I like Tom Holland. And I'm good with Venom and them kind of messing over. But this is totally uncharted territory, so we're going to have to wait and see how it all lays out. But Morbius is going to be interesting, not just for the story of Morbius, but also to see where it lands in the universes and what it means going forward. We're going to get it before we get Multiverse of Madness, quite a bit earlier now, because we're going to get Spider-Man December 17th. We'll get Morbius January 20-something, 22nd, 28th. I've got it right here. January 28th. So a month after Spider-Man No Way Home, we get Morbius, but then we don't get Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness until May now, where we were getting it in March. So Morbius is going to become even more important, because it's going to be the status quo for a while after Spider-Man. So I'm hoping it's good. All right, guys, that is the show for today. We never got to the commercial, but we had some issues, some technical issues with the videos that kind of took up that time. Stick around. We got Collecting Comics with Rex and the Not Nicks. They've got some pretty cool books lined up, including a signed David Finch cover of Red Sonja, The Price of Blood #1 that's also CGC graded. And that's one of the things they got offered up. So stick around for that. I will be back tomorrow to talk about both the Book of Boba Fett, the trailer, and the history of Boba Fett, and also some of the stuff I've gleaned off of the latest Eternal videos and what last thoughts before the movie comes out this weekend. So I hope you all have a great afternoon and evening. I will see you tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. Good night, everybody.